actually attending tonight, Mr. Schaefer?
Mr. Chair, I do not personally, but I'm looking at Daniel Fresquez, who's one of our hosts of the meeting. He would be able to give us a count of how many folks have joined us.
Mr. Fresquez, do you have that count?
Yep,
Yes,
Commissioner Raval, there are 65 current attendees.
Wonderful. That's great, and I want to first recognize that and appreciate everybody for being here and attending tonight. I think it's important because there's a lot of important issues that we've negotiated a long time to get to a certain point, and there's still concerns from constituents and that we have to listen to and address. So I'm glad to hear that everybody's here tonight. I want to thank staff for putting this together. I think that it's important for us to be transparent and really make sure that we are bringing everything forward to the public so that they know where we're at with certain things. I know that we have already been negotiating these agreements for 2 years, and everybody has had a lot of different issues with title insurance and everything else in between. And so, I'm glad to see a long road come to a certain position that I think is going to be amenable for everybody in the community. I do want to recognize that I believe that we have Lieutenant Governor Janelle Roybal from Pojoaque, Pueblo present today as well, and also the governor from San Ildefonso, Pueblo, Governor Martinez. I don't think that we had any other confirmations, but if I did miss somebody, if I did miss somebody, I don't think we have any participants from Nambe, Pueblo, or Tesuque tonight. But if I missed that, please feel free to be acknowledged, because I don't think I got an email showing that we had those participants. And if I'm wrong, staff, let me know.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You're not wrong. We had not received confirmation, but I do believe that Governor Philip Perez from Nambe, Pueblo is on the WebEx, and I don't believe I've seen anyone from Tesuque, Pueblo.
And Mr.
Governor
Chairman,
Pettis, are you here with us too?
And Mr. Chairman, maybe we could just ask if someone is on, if they could announce themselves from Pueblo leadership.
Governor Pettis, are you here? I think I've announced Pojoaque and San Ildefonso. Governor Pettis?
Yes, Commissioner Roybal, I'm here.
Good to hear from you, sir.
You too.
Okay, so I think that we need to go ahead. What I'm going to do at this point is go ahead and turn it over to staff, because they're going to do a lot of the explanation of where we're at right now. I know that it's been a long road getting to this point, and I know that we had a lot of issues with title insurance and everything in between. So I'm going to turn it over to staff. Mr. Schaefer?
Commissioner Roybal, thank you so much for your opening comments. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight. And thank you for the Pueblo leadership that has come to the table with us to talk about the road settlement agreements. My name is Gary Giron. I'm the Public Works Department Director. Let me introduce the presenters that will be talking us through these road settlement agreements tonight. I'll go first. I will be followed by Ryan Ward, the Roads, Utilities, Fleet, Solid Waste, and Traffic Division Director for Santa Fe County, who will be followed by Greg Schaefer, the County Attorney. Also present tonight as subject matter experts, we have Diego Gomez, the Public Works Project Engineer, Scott Caseman, our Real Property Supervisor, and Chris Barella, our Real Property Specialist. As we go through tonight, and I will ask Daniel to help to monitor this, in terms of meeting protocol, because we're all on a video call, sometimes they get very loud and a little confusing. I'll go through our protocol with you and ask that you try to follow that as much as possible. First of all, I think when you came into the meeting, there was a way for you to sign in electronically using an electronic form, or if that was not possible for you, you'll notice on your screen on one of the corners, it will say chat. What we would appreciate is for everyone that's here, if you would leave us your name, your address, your email address, and your phone number, so that we can make sure that any of the future meetings, any of the future correspondence, discussions, that we can share with you directly. And that way you end up as part of the community of folks that is talking about these issues. The second issue I would ask you is if you would mute yourself when you're not speaking, so that it's less confusing for people who are trying to follow the presentation. And as you will see as we go through the presentation, after each one of the road settlement agreements for each of the pueblos, there will be a question and answer period. We will ask you to hold your question to the end of each one of those sections, and that would be very helpful for us. And ask your question when we're on that road settlement agreement that affects where you live. And I will ask questions about specific property issues may be deferred to future meetings, or we will set up an individual follow-up meeting with you so that we are able to have that discussion with you and answer your questions. And I will ask you that tonight, it really is, the discussion is about the Pueblo road settlement agreements, and not specifically about Amit or any other issues. But if you have questions about those topics or any topic, if you'll send me an email, you will see up on the screen right now, my email address is there right in the middle of the page, GGIRON at, one word, Santa Fe County NM.gov. There will be another slide in a second, and maybe it might be, if you have a telephone, you could just snap a picture of that so that you have a way to get any of your questions over to us. We will give you the following presentation. There will be a general overview of the road settlement agreements that I will provide. And then Ryan Ward will provide an update on the road settlement agreements for Nambe, Pojoaque, and Tesuque. And then Greg Schaefer will provide an update on the San Ildefonso Pueblo road settlement agreement. If you go to the next slide for me, Daniel. That is my contact information, and ask that you either send an email with any of your questions. I will get that to the correct person. We will get you an answer. Or if you would rather, you can use my telephone number there at 505-986-6279, and feel free to leave a message, and I will make sure that we get you a response to that. So that is for questions about the road settlement agreements, general questions, and comments and questions about the San Ildefonso interim permits. Daniel, can you go to the next slide? What are the road settlement agreements? Be specific. The agreements are between Santa Fe County and the pueblos of Nambe, Pojoaque, Tesuque, and San Ildefonso. And the other party of the agreements is the Department of Interior. The agreements are intended to resolve disputes over certain county-maintained roads. And all the agreements became effective on the same date, which was April 12th, 2018, when they were approved by the Secretary of the Interior.
You have to have a landlord.
Next slide, Daniel. Daniel, I'm wondering if you could go ahead and mute everyone. Is that possible? Not possible?
Yeah, just 1 second. It's gonna mute everybody, then I'm gonna come back and unmute you. Or once I mute everybody, you can unmute yourself.
Okay. What do the road settlement agreements do? To be clear, all the road settlement agreements for each of the pueblos are different. And at a high level, the goals of the agreements are to avoid uncertain, expensive, and lengthy litigation over the legal status of the county-maintained roads. They're also to provide long-term right-of-ways for county-maintained roads across Pueblo land. These will be issued by the Department of the Interior with the consent of each of the respective pueblos. The right-of-ways will be granted for 2 consecutive 99-year terms or 198 years total. What they do is they ensure that private land within the exterior boundaries of the pueblos have a recognized way in and out for each property owner from a county-maintained road. In the pueblos of Pojoaque and Tesuque, the rights of way will be issued to the county, and the county will continue to maintain the present county-maintained roads. In the pueblos of Nambe and San Ildefonso, right-of-ways will be issued to the Bureau of Indian Affairs for both county-maintained roads, both for county-maintained roads that cross Pueblo lands with the Pueblo consent, and private land that will be authorized by the county. Existing county-maintained roads and the 2 new roads that will be constructed in San Ildefonso will become Bureau of Indian Affairs roads, BIA roads. And the county will maintain the roads as described in the road maintenance agreements. If we can go to the next slide, Daniel. What roads are we talking about? And let me walk you through this slide. You will see 4 bullets, and each of the bullets is for each of the different Pueblo communities. First one is Nambe, second is Pojoaque, third is Tesuque, and the fourth one is San Ildefonso. I'll give you a second to take a look at that. Okay, Daniel. Thank you. Who did the county hire to survey the rights of way and access points? The Santa Fe County hired Precision Surveys, Inc. to survey the rights of way, including access points for property owners, prepare accurate boundaries of each segment of the rights of way, to set boundary markers in the area or monuments, and prepare the right-of-way applications to be submitted to the Department of the Interior. And now I will let Ryan Ward, the Division Director for Roads, Utilities, and Fleet, present information regarding the Nambe, Pojoaque, and Tesuque Pueblos.
Thank you, Director Ron. Scoot up so everybody can hear me. Again, I'm Ryan Ward. I'm the Division Director here in Public Works. And I would like to go over, if you could, Daniel, could please move to the next slide. So what I'd like to talk about briefly is what is the status of the Nambe Pueblo Road Settlement Agreement. Currently, the survey work has largely been completed. As far as the right-of-way reference markers, currently Precision Surveying is working on placing those in the field, and those are for various property corners and changes along property boundary. And currently the draft applications have been prepared. And as you can see there, I won't read all of that, but one of the things that I would like to kind of focus in on is what we're assessing right now with the environmental and archaeological reports, surveys, and site assessments that we're currently working with various groups to make determinations on if those are going to be needed to support any of the right-of-way applications. The additional remaining steps included is public outreach and looking through finalizing the county conveyance of the right-of-ways across private land, as well as the road maintenance agreement. So the next topic is future public outreach, and one of the things I would like to stress to everybody that joined us tonight is if you would reach out to different community members and individuals to make sure that they're aware of these types of meetings. We always need help to get the word out. We do our best to try to get that out via web, email, various means of communication, but that's something we would love to have some help with. The next thing is I'll start kind of there at the top. The virtual and in-person meetings will be offered in October, and this is review survey access points to private land from surveyed right-of-way, identify gaps that will require private landowners to obtain a gap right-of-way from the Pueblo. Right-of-way width is 25 from the center line or the boundary of the private land, whichever is less. A gap right-of-way is needed if the private land boundary is beyond the surveyed right-of-way. Notice of these meetings will be advertised in various ways, as I've mentioned. There's a couple different ways that we'll be trying to communicate this out. And then individual notice to private landowners whose property is burdened by county prescriptive easement for county maintenance roads. And one thing I would like to just briefly go over real quick is each lot on a private land shall be paired with one surveyed access point. So that means as far as your access or your driveway to the county road, that's what we're looking at in the process, is to make sure that there's an access point provided. And in some cases, the common access point may be paired with multiple lots on a private land. So it's something to keep in mind when there's driveways or access points that are very close. We're looking at that as far as safety goes to make sure that we can assess that and determine how we move forward with that point of access.
And I think if I could, thank you for that, Ryan, I would just underscore as to the next stage of the outreach and why we're here is now that the survey has advanced sufficiently far, we're at a place where individual property owners will be able to assess what their access point is and confirm that it's been accurately captured in the right-of-way surveys and documentation. They'll be able to identify if there is in fact a gap that they'll have to work with the Pueblo individually to address. We'll be working with our surveyor, Precision Surveys, as well as with county team members to decide how best to roll that information out to the public. As Mr. Ward indicated, we envision that will take a variety of formats. We may be able to do some virtual meetings such as this, targeted to specific areas within Nambe Pueblo, so that the folks that are coming to a particular meeting are clustered around specific roads. We may do some of that in person, as we know that some members of our community don't have internet access for any number of reasons. But that is the next part of our public outreach and plan, so to speak, is to figure out how to best provide that information, because we are at a point where individual landowners are going to be wanting to see what it looks like in terms of those final surveys. So I just wanted to unpack that public outreach a bit more before we take any questions that anybody has relative to the Nambe Pueblo Road Settlement Agreement. And again, I would just like to recognize and thank Governor Perez for all the work that he's personally done in addressing these issues and moving forward with the surveys. As indicated, he's granted permission for the surveyor to already start placing some of the reference markers in the ground as a show of good faith in terms of pushing this over the finish line. So I appreciate his personal attention to this as well as that of his team. So thank you, Governor. And we'd be pleased at this point to take any questions that anybody has regarding Nambe Pueblo.
Mr. Schaefer, I'd like to request that if there are any questions, to send your name through the chat feature just to avoid any feedback or any loud noises. All right, we have a question from Carl Trujillo. Go ahead, Carl.
Daniel? Can you hear me? Yes. Can you hear me? Yes. So how do you get a copy of the road surveys that were approved by the Department of Interior?
Did you hear that? So I'm gonna respond. Just repeat the question back. You would like a copy of the surveys that have been approved by the Department of the Interior?
Yes.
The survey has not yet been approved by the Department of the Interior, to the best of my knowledge. That will be done as part of the formal right-of-way approval process. Is there a particular area that you would like additional information regarding based upon the current rights-of-way, the current survey that has been done for the right-of-way?
Yes, there is a particular location I'm interested in.
Okay. Could I ask Mr. Trujillo that you email Gary Harone and let him know what the parcel is so that we can work directly with you to get access to that information to you?
Okay, I will do that. And when do they anticipate that? Can any of these agreements be put in place without the BIA, the Department of Interior approval? Or what do we need to wait for as homeowners?
Thank you, Mr. Trio. So the question was, what are the next steps, and does anything have to be put in place without Department of Interior approval? We will be working over the upcoming weeks to do the outreach to private landowners that we discussed. We will then work with the Pueblo leadership and tribal council to finalize the right-of-way application for the rights-of-way that will be crossing Pueblo land. That right-of-way application needs to be approved by the tribal council. They need to consent to the grant of the right-of-ways before they are submitted to the Department of Interior for final approval. So that's the overall process, and the survey work is the heaviest lift relative to moving that forward. But the short answer to your question is that no, right-of-ways cannot be issued without both tribal council consent and the Department of the Interior approval.
So if I hear you correctly, then the overall survey for the roads has been finalized, but each individual right-of-way that's not within Nambe Pueblo, that's not within 25 feet of that center line, would have to go in for an application, and then it would be approved by the Pueblo, and then it needs to go to the Department of Interior. Is that correct?
So I believe now, if I could make sure I'm correct, Mr. Trio, you're asking about gap right-of-ways. So again, this would be a right-of-way for an individual property owner because their property is more than is beyond the length of the right-of-way.
Correct.
Yes. So once the rights-of-way are issued by the Department of the Interior and those gaps are identified, then yes, that private landowner would work with the Pueblo of Nambe in order to obtain a gap right-of-way, and that is what's called out for in the settlement agreement. If the governor wants to address what that process looks like or what they envision that looking like, once we're at that point, I would defer to him, but that would be an interaction between the private landowner and the Nambe Pueblo.
So I guess the question then is, at that point, there will be a process set up by Nambe Pueblo, and the council will approve it, the right of way, and whatever amount that is attached to it. But is it finalized with the Pueblo Council, or does it still, each individual gap issue have to go to the Department of Interior?
Mr. Trujillo, my understanding is that if a request is made for a gap right-of-way, that would be subject to the Department of Interior approval. The settlement agreement does not require, and I don't know if the Pueblo will pursue a different alternative, which is a land assignment process, which is something that the Pueblo of Pojoaque has implemented. But that would be at the discretion of the Pueblo, and it's not specifically called for in the settlement agreement. So to sum up, if it's a right-of-way, that would require both tribal council approval and Department of Interior approval if a private landowner needed such a gap right-of-way.
So the follow-up question to that would be, I mean, I don't know, I'm not sure who would have the answer for this, but what would be the timeline that a homeowner would expect, one, and would this automatically be granted for the 35 years that was listed in the agreement?
With regard to the timeline, again, that I would defer to the Pueblo. I don't know that top of mind. If the governor is not available or another representative is not available, we will follow up with them and circle back to you as to what their anticipated timeline is, Mr. Trio.
So good evening. This is Governor Perez. Could the question be repeated, just so I know what it is?
Sure. Can I state the question to the governor? Hey, okay, thank you. So the question is that, as I understand it now, is that you may or you may not be, so if somebody that is outside the 25 feet and has a considered gap issue, or does have a gap issue, they will go to through an application process to the tribe. And one of the questions was at that point, is tribal council approval all that is required, or does it need to go to the Department of Interior after the approval of the tribal council? So that's the first question. And then the second question is each of these gap issues going to be granted for the 35-year time period? And the reason for that was that most mortgages for title insurance are 30 years. And so that was one of the reasons that was a big motive for these agreements, so that people could gain title insurance because of the 35-year grant of easement.
And if I would just, before you answer, Governor, for everyone's reference, I think for those who are following along in the settlement agreement, we're looking at section 10B, and it provides that for any gaps, if any, that extend beyond 25 feet on either side of the center line of the county-maintained road, the Pueblo will provide a process for private residents to obtain a right-of-way pursuant to 25 CFR Part 169. The Pueblo agrees that such gap right-of-ways shall be for a term of up to 35 years for a nominal fee. So I think, Mr. Trio, by referencing the Code of Federal Regulations, that answers your question, that yes, the Department of Interior will have to approve it. And the rest, again, I would defer to the governor. Thank you.
So to answer the question, the Pueblo has been waiting for the release of the road survey so we can accurately identify any severity of gaps that exist within the boundaries of Nambe Pueblo. We're in that process of analyzing that data, so we don't know to what extreme it exists. Depending on the number of years that the Pueblo will grant access through that gap area would dictate whether or not we would have to go to the Bureau for approval.
So Governor, if I heard you correctly, is based on the time of the right-of-way agreement, if it's for some time period, that could be approved only by the tribal council, and for some time periods that are greater, that would take the tribal council approval and Department of Interior approval.
Yes, sir.
So anybody asking for a 35-year right-of-way agreement because they want to get title insurance, that would be tribal council and Department of Interior. Is that correct?
Yes, for that duration of up to 35 years, it would require approval by the Bureau of Indian Affairs.
And Governor, is the Pueblo Council inclined to approve requests of 35 years if the homeowner is asking for that?
Again, Mr. Trujillo, we don't know the results, or we haven't analyzed fully the results of the road survey to fully comprehend the extent of that gap issue. If it's minor, then I would go out on a limb and say the council would probably consider that. Again, it's going to depend on the severity of that gap issue.
Okay. And just, I'm not going to hold you, obviously, I know you have to get approval from the council and stuff, but minor would be something in the order of less than 100 feet or less than 50 feet, or, I mean, I know that you have some areas where it's really, really long. So I'm just trying to get an idea of what you might consider long.
Okay, I guess minor is also interpreted not only the spacing of gap, but also the number of gaps that exist within the Pueblo.
Okay, so the number of gaps. But for an individual, for an individual homeowner, they're only concerned with the one access point. Is that correct?
Right, but to be fair and equitable to everyone. So if we're addressing 100 gap issues that are all within, say, 5 feet versus, 10 or 20 feet, that could be the deciding factor.
Okay, and so I guess there's a lot of noise here, but so I guess the question is there a possibility that a homeowner may not be granted a 35-year easement?
No, I would say there probably wouldn't be that possibility. I don't foresee the tribal council taking that strong of a position.
Okay, thank you for that, Governor. And let me just ask you one last question: through your experience dealing with the the Department of Interior, after the council has approved a right-of-way and whatever fee is attached, how long, in your experience, do you have working with the Department of Interior, do you believe that homeowner would have to wait before that is actually approved by them? Have they created a streamlined process, or is it just going to be the traditional process for you guys? I know you guys fight this all the time. So,
to be honest, I don't even have a number of days, weeks, or months, because that's something that I just don't have in my head as far as the length it takes to get something approved. I apologize.
Okay.
And
So, and one last question, Governor.
We need to move on. There's going to be other questions.
Sure.
We have 3 more Pueblo agreements. And if I could ask you, if you could submit your questions to my email address in writing, we will get you detailed answers for these questions.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay. I was shocked to hear that the Pueblos hadn't gotten the final survey yet. It seems like they would have had that already.
It has been a long process that we have been working with all of the Pueblo communities on, and we're moving as quickly as we can through this, and it's just taking quite a long time.
Okay,
With that,
thank
I'll
you.
ask if there's any other questions regarding this road settlement agreement.
We have Diane and Phil Roybal that signed up for a question.
Diane?
I didn't sign up for a question. I just giving my information for
okay.
email, and that's it.
Okay. We have, so I'm going to give this question. They typed the entire thing on chat, so I'll read it. And after this, I'm going to unmute the telephones, and we can ask the people that called in if they have questions. So this question is, hello, my name is Linda Fluke, and I live in Nambe. I've spoken with Commissioner Roybal and Olivia Romo, and I appreciate their time and assistance. We have talked with regards to changing the name to our road to a Tewa name in 2007 without the neighborhood's knowledge or approval. Road signs were placed a few years ago. I understand the procedure must take place in order to change the name of the road. And it's a multi-part question. How many petitions have been filed to change road names? How many of these petitions have been approved by the Board of County Commissioners and the Pueblo? And if there has been successful petitions, what has been the basis for approval?
We will follow up with you. I can state generally that the county began a process, I want to say it was over a decade ago, to work with the Pueblo governments in order to provide native names to roads, or at least certain roads within the Pueblo boundaries. That was not unique to Nambe. Also certainly included Pojoaque and perhaps some others. So that was a collaborative government-to-government effort that began, as I said, I want to say it's almost a decade ago, relative to how many petitions have been filed with the county to have roads, names of roads changed. I don't have that information top of mind, and that's something that we'll have to get back to you. But in terms of the overall effort to provide Tewa names to roads within the Pueblo boundaries, again, that dates back for some time and was a matter of government-to-government cooperation.
I'm going to go ahead and unmute all of the call-in phone numbers, so please bear with the feedback that may occur.
Are there any other questions? Hearing none, Daniel. If we can remute,
Okay, I'll do that right now.
and then we keep going with the presentation.
Thank you, Daniel. We do appreciate the questions. The next section is, where is the status of the Pojoaque Pueblo Road Settlement Agreement? Currently, most of the survey work has been completed. It's still under review by the Pueblo. We have draft right-of-way applications that have been prepared and will be reviewed by the Pueblo and BIA with a final review that must be approved by the Tribal Council for submission to the DOI or the Department of Interior. Additional remaining steps include final public outreach regarding location of right-of-ways, access points, and gaps, similar to what we've been discussing. If you could please go to the next slide, Daniel. Thank you. Again, we ask that outreach as much as can be done by the folks in the community. We do appreciate that. And so we'll continue holding the virtual and in-person meetings, and we'll be review of boundaries of right-of-way, again, identifying gaps that will require private landowners to obtain a land assignment from the Pueblo or an individual right-of-way from the Department of the Interior. This is a little different from the previous one I spoke on in Nambe. So the right-of-way width is an existing driving surface of plus 4 foot on either side of the boundary of private land, or whichever is less. A gap land assignment or right-of-way for ingress egress is needed if there's a gap of Pueblo land located directly between private land and the public roadway. Notice of the meetings, again, will be advertised in those ways, and I won't read through those. And then I believe we'll open it back up for questions.
All right, if anybody is online and would like to ask a question, please enter your name into the chat field, and then we'll follow that same process as before.
I don't know. Can you guys hear me? This is Dave Neal.
Yes, we can hear you.
I got a whole bunch of questions regarding the surveys, because it's my understanding that the surveys that have been completed for all 3 of the Pueblos have been completed by Precision Survey, which they were under contract at the time of the survey with the Pueblo of each particular Pueblo. And I think since then, the county has agreed or has entered into a contract with the same company to acknowledge the surveys. So what process can be followed if there is a dispute by the landowner regarding the survey? And of course, that's not something there's a lot of reasons I question the whole survey from Precision to begin with. That's my personal opinion. But what process is it available to a landowner to dispute the survey, particularly when the county has actually contracted with the same company that did the survey for the Pueblos? End of question.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. I'm going to focus on the right-of-way portion of that. We contracted with Precision Surveys in order to do survey work specific to the rights-of-way. The outreach that we described relative to those rights-of-way, that will be staffed as well by Precision Surveys. So if there is a question specifically relative to where the right-of-way is placed and what the survey is for that, vis-a-vis private land boundaries, that could be brought forward at that time. The point of that outreach is to allow the public to see the results of the right-of-way survey at least, and bring any concerns or information that they have forward at that time so that it can be addressed before the right-of-way applications are finalized and submitted to the Department of the Interior. So again, our focus and the work that survey has been, Precision Survey has been contracted to do on the county's behalf is specific to the rights-of-way. We do not have a contract relative to land boundary surveys. That would be as between Precision Survey and the Pueblos. So I'll stop there, but again, relative to the right-of-way and its location vis-a-vis property boundaries, that's why we're doing the individual outreach so that people can see those results and raise any concerns before those are finalized.
I'm not sure who was answering my question there. If I apologize for not having the right answer here. Is that Greg answering the question?
That is
Yes.
Greg Schaefer, the county attorney, answering the question.
Yeah, that's
fine. I'm by myself. I'm sorry, I have a mask on, so you can't
I
see
know.
who's talking. It's just a voice emanating from nowhere.
Yeah, I understand because I don't have to wear a mask here at my house, and so I appreciate that. But it just seems a little odd that there needs to be a recourse for the private landowner if they don't agree with the surveys. And I don't know if that's in the procedures, and I must admit at this point that I came in too late, so I was surprised that we were talking about Nambe. I thought this was going to be mostly about Sanai. So for that, I apologize, and for that, I will stop talking. Thank you.
Yes, sir. And we have not got to Sinai yet in speaking to the surveys and the road agreements there yet, sir. Are there any other questions?
Nothing. Nobody else has submitted their name for questions, but let me unmute the telephones now.
I do what I wanted. I sent my letter to the editor.
Fair market value or no?
That's for asparagus, so there's a contract.
Are there any questions with the individuals on the phone?
I proofread it again.
Yeah, see, Heather is saying that they should, precision shouldn't be wrapped in the survey acts.
Gary and everybody there, I didn't hear any questions. Yes, continue.
Okay.
Let's proceed.
Thank you.
Daniel, I put my name down, Daniel, but you didn't see it?
Mr. Trujillo?
Okay, is this Carl?
Yes, it is. So just a follow up, and I apologize for coming on late. I saw the sign there at Nambe. And one suggestion I would make is you have a phone number to call, but if you just put on the sign, find it at the website, at Santa Fe County, then people don't have to take that extra step to call. So I got on a few minutes late, and I apologize if I didn't hear this at the beginning. So as I understand it now, the county contracted to Precision Survey to do these surveys, and these for what would now be the right of ways or the roads that Santa Fe County or the BIA would be in control of. The question is these surveys are not completed or they are completed?
Mr. Trujillo, I think if you ask the principal of the company, he would say they're substantially complete. And so this is the process of finalizing.
And so the next question follow up is these will not be shared with the public until they're complete, or can people get a copy of what has been done up to this point?
This is the outreach that we're speaking of, and we'll have to coordinate with Precision in terms of how that will be made available before they are finalized. Because they're not at this point stamped by Precision as final, but that's the outreach that we're describing. Does that answer the question?
So Greg, I guess the question is that they're close to who needs to give final approval to these for them to be complete? Is the work not complete, or is this the county and Precision finalizing it, or are they actually going out and getting more survey points currently, or have all the survey points been collected and you just haven't released the survey to the public?
I don't want to overstate my knowledge as to the survey process. I believe that the field work is largely complete. I believe with regard to Nambe and Pojoaque Pueblo, all of the monument markers as well as the field markers have been ordered. And so the process of the completion is to now put that in a form that works with the BIA, DOI road right-of-way application process, as well as clean up the legal descriptions and meets and bounds descriptions that are necessary for each segment. So that's what I understand to be generally where we're at in the process.
And if I could add that, Mr. Trujillo, at subsequent meetings, we will have, when we're meeting with individual communities, we will have more detailed maps, and we will be able to share the details that we have presently, even though they are still in their draft format. And that should be some of the follow-up that you should expect in the next couple of weeks.
And so will these meetings be held virtually with the map on the screen, or how do you anticipate to relay this information?
Mr. Trujillo, we are still working on that. We believe that part of them will be handled just the same way in virtual meetings, but that some of the meetings may necessitate us meeting with folks face to face so that we can better share information. But we're going to be problem solving that and working them on a community by community basis.
Okay, so Mr. Huron, if I heard you correct earlier, I would be, and individuals or like myself, I will contact you for a particular area, and you'll be able to share that with me currently.
Yes, what we will do is we will set up meetings for the area that you live in with the community members affected, and then go through that information with you.
Okay, and I expect that to be done just through email, but not going in to meet with you.
It might be, we are working out the details of that, but we will follow up with you, and we're going to make sure that we share the information that we do have. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead and move on if we don't have any other questions. The next item is, where is the status of Tesuque Pueblo Road Settlement Agreement? Again, the county surveyor on this particular, in this Pueblo, had discovered some errors in the Bureau of Land Management surveys. And so that is being coordinated between Precision Survey Incorporated, as well as BLM, to make a determination of where the contradictions are in the certain areas. So just so everybody's aware of that, the errors in the BLM surveys will have to be corrected before the right-of-way survey can proceed. So that will have to be worked out. The time frame for the right-of-way application is still to be determined. Then we'll open it back up for questions.
Dave Neal here. I've got a question on that. Can you hear me?
Sir.
Can you describe the nature of the errors that BLM had made? I don't think you can, but I thought I'd just ask.
No, I wouldn't want to try and give voice to them only insofar as it's not my area of expertise. County Road 72I is a very small segment of road overall in terms of everything that the county is attempting to resolve with the various pueblos. This is the least of it, so to speak, in terms of its actual length, as well as the number of people that are affected. So I'll put it in context in terms of this particular road. But the errors and the issues that were discovered, as I said, I wouldn't be able to do them justice, but I do know that they've been brought to the attention of the Bureau of Land Management, and the Pueblo Tesuque is aware of them as well, and they're coordinating on the correction of those errors. So sorry, I can't give you a more satisfying answer, but I wouldn't want to speak.
Sure, no, I understand.
If Mr. Neal, this is Gary Hedon. If you could send me an email with your question, and we'll see if we can get a more descriptive answer from Mr. Medrano with Precision Survey, and then pass.
Sure, that's fine. I was just kind of, really, it was a curiosity question, if nothing else. So I'm finished. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any other questions?
We have a question that came through chat. Have the local title companies been included in this process, and are they on board?
Thank you. So, yes, is the short answer. Slightly longer answer is as follows. I did inquire today of John Fox, who is a representative of local title companies, as to what the current status is relative to the underwriting in the area. What I took away from the conversation is that title companies are no longer accepting ingress and egress in the policy. In other words, they're not taking an exception to that, but they are noting the contingency relative to the implementation of the settlement agreements. And from his perspective, at least, that seemed to be working in terms of transactions going forward. So that's my understanding of where things stand vis-a-vis the title companies based upon that conversation. I have not heard anecdotally of additional ongoing issues, but that doesn't mean that they don't exist. I'm just stating that I haven't heard of them.
All right, that's the last question through chat. I'm going to unmute the phones now.
So Daniel, if I may follow up on that with Mr. Schaefer.
What?
So Greg, I did in the process try and get title insurance, and I've talked to John Fox extensively, and I've dealt with Prima Title as well, and they are waiting for these surveys to be complete. It's not as easily, the underwriters aren't accepting it until we get these 35-year agreements in place. There are exceptions. The exception is that if you are within that 25-foot in Nambe Pueblo, and I'm speaking about Nambe Pueblo now, that they will grant that. They will also grant possibly one that had already had been granted title insurance before. But so I guess it's not clear. It's not everybody. It's hit or miss, but they are waiting for these surveys to be completed, and the Bureau, the Department of Interior, to finish up and sign off on these, where individuals can be granted the 35 years, and at that point, the underwriters feel comfortable insuring the property.
So I'm going to take a shot at paraphrasing back in terms of specific issues. What I'm understanding from you, Mr. Trujillo, is that at least in your personal circumstance, it was because you were outside of the right-of-way area that insurance would not be issued in that instance. That's what I heard. I just want to make sure I got it straight.
Yes, that is correct. So, and I think that's the same for everybody. So there are some that fall within the boundaries of that agreement, and they are fine. And those that do have gap issues, those are the ones that are not fine. Which I don't know what that percentage is, but like in Pojoaque, Pueblo, for instance, with the 4 foot, that could be a very large number.
Thank you for that information and for sharing that with the meeting. Thank you, Mr. Trujillo.
Okay, I'm going to unmute everybody to see if anybody has questions over the phone.
Being too lax places that are carrying it into the places that are not maybe being. Good job. Oh, yeah. Hey, drill.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate everyone's time. I'm going to hand it over now to Attorney Schaefer.
Daniel, if we can go to slide 16. We're going to start with just reminding everybody participating in the meeting what the new roads are within San Ildefonso Pueblo. So Yellowbird Road is a new road that will be constructed entirely on BIA, on Pueblo land pursuant to rights of way that are issued to the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Again, the road will be maintained by Santa Fe County pursuant to a road maintenance agreement. But Yellowbird Road is generally depicted on the map that is included in the presentation. It's on the top side of the north side of the Rio Pojoaque. In addition, there is a new road on the south side of the Rio Pojoaque, will be known as Blue Dove Road, and that will connect County Maintained Road 84 to 84B. So if you go to the next slide, please, Daniel. Wanted to talk specifically about those two new roads, Yellowbird Road and Blue Dove Road. The current focus of the efforts by the county and the Pueblo of San Ildefonso is on Yellowbird Road, and that is because the Pojoaque Basin Regional Water System water lines will be placed in the Yellowbird Road right away. In addition, by virtue of the county constructing phase 1 of Yellowbird Road, significant construction costs can be saved for the regional water system. I know that this community is very sensitive to and very knowledgeable about these agreements. So I did want to call to your attention certain changes that are being pursued from what is written in the settlement agreement itself. First, with regard to the driving surface for these roads, the settlement agreement calls for them to be base course driving surface. The parties are pursuing an agreement with the Bureau of Indian Affairs that will allow the final driving surface to be 4 inches of recycled asphalt pavement with a single layer of chip seal. I'm going to ask the project manager from the Public Works Department, Diego Gomez, to briefly explain the rationale behind that change and why he feels that that is a better long-term solution for the community, both in terms of driving surface as well as maintenance costs.
Good evening, everybody. So base course is basically a mixture of sand and gravel. And what base course is, if you look at County Road 84C, right next to the intersection of Evergreen Lane, County Road 101D, there's a lot of washboarding. And base course is still a dirt road. And so we have come up with a plan, and it has to do with the DOT donating a lot of recycled asphalt pavement to us. That's what's stockpiled there by the cemetery. That's what we're going to use as the base, the foundation for the chip seal. So a chip seal is a bituminous driving surface. For people that don't know a lot about roads, it's going to look just like a paved road. We've used this process very successfully in other roads in the county. We just recently, this summer, did it to 8 roads in the El Dorado area. Between 5 and 10 years ago, we did it to a bunch of roads in Chimayo and La Puebla. And so we feel that with the same amount of money, instead of having a dirt road, we're going to have a paved surface. I understand a lot of the concerns on County Road 84C and 84 is that the road is washboard all the time, and we go out there and grade it, and within a couple of days, it's already washboard again. So our intent is to not have this problem. If we're going to go out here and spend all this effort and money to build a road, let's end up with a paved surface, and that's what our plan is to do.
Thank you for that, Diego. And the next change, from what's in the settlement agreement is related to the actual construction of Yellowbird Road. The settlement agreement calls for construction to take place after utilities have been installed. The agreement being pursued by the parties is actually to construct Yellowbird Road in 2 phases. Phase 1 would be constructed before the utilities are installed and would have the subgrade, basically the dirt, as the final or interim driving surface, probably a more accurate term. Then the road will be operational in that state, and once the utilities, the regional water system water lines have been installed within the right-of-way, that's when phase 2 will occur, which is what Mr. Gomez was describing, which is the recycled asphalt pavement along with the chip seal. So again, the road will be tentatively planned to be constructed in 2 phases. And if you go on to the next slide, please, Daniel. So we are working with the engineer that did the initial design of Yellowbird Road to finalize that design. It will ultimately have to be approved, those final plans, by both the county, the Pueblos, San Ildefonso, and the Bureau of Indian Affairs. That will drive the final survey work with regard to Yellowbird Road. Ultimately, as with all of these surveys, they must be reviewed by San Ildefonso and BIA, and we intend to do the similar sort of public outreach to the public regarding the final location of Yellowbird Road, as well as access points that will be identified as part of the survey off of Yellowbird Road. Because this is a new road and represents new construction, the right-of-way application will have to be supported by an environmental as well as an archaeological assessment. County's in the process of procuring those services, which will need to be completed before the right-of-way application can be submitted. The right-of-way applications still need to be and must be prepared and reviewed by the Pueblo and the BIA before the final version is approved by the Tribal Council and submitted to the Department of Interior. In addition, the county will need to prepare and negotiate with the Pueblo and BIA a road maintenance agreement. This is all on our to-do list over the upcoming months. But we hope to see phase 1 of Yellowbird Road to be constructed in 2021, next calendar year. And that construction will be coordinated with the construction of the regional water system so as to ensure that we're ahead of them and they can come behind and install the water line after the road clearing has been completed. You go on to the next slide, please. So I'm going to, go over this fairly quickly because for those of you who've been on the call for a while, we are at a point where it does make sense to reach out to the public to go over the access points and the surveyed right-of-way in greater detail. And that would include both the access points to private land that go directly off of the surveyed right-of-way. But in addition, some property will take access off of county-maintained roads indirectly, so to speak, from other roads and easements across private property. So that has been documented as well, and that will be part of the review that we do with the public so that people can clearly see how it is that they'll be able to access their private land. We anticipate that any issues would be brought up at that time before the right-of-ways are finalized and submitted to the federal government after approval by the Tribal Council. In addition, we plan to reach out individually to private landowners who have unique access issues that merit that sort of direct attention. You move on to the next slide, please, Daniel. With regard to the what I think the settlement agreement refers to as the subject roads, those will be focused on after completion of the rights-of-way application for Yellowbird Road, and most likely Blue Dove Road. And this is County Road 84, 84A, 84B, and the northern segment of County Maintained Road 101D. I don't have a firm timeline for you with regard to those rights-of-way applications. I would emphasize, however, that the deadline in the settlement agreement for all of right-of-way applications is April 12, 2023, which is several years out. And we do not anticipate any issues in meeting that deadline. And as that process and those rights-of-way move forward, we will be endeavoring to have the same public outreach to members of the community who take access off of those roads. But again, I don't have a concrete time frame at this point for that. Move on, if you could, to the next slide, Daniel. So one of the things that we wanted to specifically talk to the public about this evening are interim permits to be issued by the Pueblo of San Ildefonso pursuant to the settlement agreement. You know, generally speaking, these authorize private landowners to continue to use county maintained roads for ingress and egress in the interim period, and also allow for the continued maintenance of those roads by the county. We're calling them shorthand interim permits because, you know, subject to potential extension and the location of the underlying property, they'll expire on April 12, 2023, or when the new roads are open to the public or rights of way are issued for County Maintained Road 84, 84A, 84B, and the northern segment of 101D. Again, that will be whatever event occurs first. I would note, however, that under the draft, the terms of the draft interim permits, that the San Ildefonso governor is authorized to grant extensions of all of the permits. You can go on to the next slide, please, Daniel. So the interim permits arise out of the settlement agreement itself. Section 9 of the settlement agreement required the Pueblo to do certain things. Grant the county a temporary public road permit, provide legal access to all private land through a legislative grant of temporary access, and then grant specific temporary access across Pueblo land to individual landowners seeking such specific access. To implement that section of the settlement agreement, the Pueblo enacted a tribal law, the Interim Road Access Authorization Act of 2018. And then finally, other provisions of the settlement agreement contemplate the Pueblo issuing permits to the county in order to do work on Pueblo land. If you could move on, please, Daniel. So the email notification that went out included links to the actual interim permits themselves, or at least a link to the web page where they could be found. The terms of the interim permits are pretty consistent across the four. I'm going to go over those terms in detail one time, and then we'll go more quickly as we discuss specific interim permits. So the first interim permit that I'll discuss is a temporary global public road access authorization for all private landowners within the Pueblo of San Ildefonso. This interim permit would apply to all county maintained roads that are subject to the settlement agreement. It would grant temporary access over Pueblo land to private landowners and their invitees who access their property from an existing identified access point, common access point off of a county maintained road. It would require, consistent with the settlement agreement, that a private landowner obtain the Pueblo's and county's approval prior to changing their existing access point, common access point. It would reflect that the interim permit does not confer, grant, or recognize any property right or property interest in any entity, private landowner, or individual. It would recognize, consistent with current practice, that there may be occasions when the Pueblo might temporarily close portions of a county-maintained road for cultural purposes, but require the Pueblo to provide as much advance notice as possible of any such temporary closures. Again, that is consistent with current practice. In addition, when rights-of-way are granted for the both new roads as well as the roads that will continue largely where they are, that right exists under federal law. And then finally, the Global Public Road Access Authorization Permit would authorize the Pueblo governor to revoke a grant of temporary access to a particular landowner if the governor determines that the private landowner is not materially complied with or is not in material compliance with any terms of the Interim Road Access Authorization Act of 2018 or the interim permit. It's important to note two things. First, the permit requires that prior to any such revocation, the governor would provide the private landowner with written notice of the noncompliance and provide the private landowner with a reasonable opportunity to cure that noncompliance. In addition, as it relates to the interim permits, I would note that really the only material obligation that I would see is the use of the designated access point. In other words, not creating any road of convenience across Pueblo land. I think that is the only instance that I could foresee where there would be an instance of material non-compliance. And then if you could please move forward, Daniel. So at a high level, this interim permit that we were just discussing is generally applicable to all private landowners. It is That's the third time my wife has called me, and I hope that I'm not getting in trouble, but it's for a good cause. The interim permit is generally applicable to all private landowners. In other words, it doesn't list individual private landowners on it. It's written in a very global and general way, nor does it identify specific private land. Private landowners do not have to apply for this interim permit. It's something that the governor will issue automatically after it's been approved, and there is no fee for this interim permit. Next slide, please, Daniel. So this is very similar, these terms, to what we just went over. So I'm not going to go over them in detail again. If you could go to the next slide, please, Daniel. This is again for a property-specific temporary public road access permit that's issued to a specific individual landowner. So this interim permit is again only issued upon the request of a private landowner. So it's a private landowner going to the Pueblo of San Ildefonso and asking that a permit be issued specifically to them for a specific piece of private land. So this permit would list the name of the private landowner to whom it is issued. It would specify the private land at issue, as well as the county maintained road off of which access would be taken. There is a $100 processing fee for this individual property-specific interim permit, but I would emphasize here that no one is required to get such an interim permit. That's not required under the settlement agreement. That's an individual decision that people need to make as to whether or not it's in their best interest to get that. Now, in preparing for this meeting and doing some outreach, I have been asked, why would I want one? And again, I can't speak or give specific advice to any individual, but the only The only reasons I could think of were potentially three. Number one, it may provide peace of mind to individual private landowners to have a permit issued by the governor of the Pueblo specifically to them for their property. And that may, again, or may not have real value to the person who would want that permit. Secondly, you may want to request an individual project, or excuse me, property specific permit so that you have confirmation that your access point is accurate vis-a-vis the Pueblo. And then the third reason that I could think of that one might want to seek such an individual specific property permit is to the extent it might be relevant to financing that you're pursuing, as was stated earlier by Mr. Trujillo. You can go on to the next slide, please, Daniel. The third type of interim permit that I wanted to briefly explain is a temporary public road permit to the county for county maintained road 84C, 84D, and Sandy Way. The terms are generally consistent with those that we've already gone over. This permit would authorize continued public use of those roads, accessed by private landowners and their invitees of those roads, as well as continued maintenance of those roads by the county at the county's expense. It reflects the settlement agreement's requirement that private landowners need both county and Pueblo consent before changing any access points. It also requires that the county comply with applicable tribal and federal laws and regulations. It requires the county to remain within designated areas for the identified roads. It means that the county's road maintenance activities cannot enlarge the existing roadway or change the locations. Again, I'm hitting the most significant terms to my mind, so I'm not going over each of the bullets that appear on the screen at this time. It does require the county to notify the Pueblo in the event we discover or disturb any cultural matter and prohibits the county from removing any cultural matter. It also requires the county to notify the Pueblo's Realty Office of scheduled maintenance. Finally, it contains the same revocation provision that exists in the individual permits, and states that it's not intended to modify or amend the settlement. You can go on to the next slide, please. And then the final permit is a maintenance permit for county maintained road 84, 84A, 84D, and northern segment of county maintained road 101D. And again, this would recognize the county's ongoing right under the settlement agreement to maintain those roadways at the county's expense between the time or until such time as rights of way are granted to the Bureau of Indian Affairs and the county enters into a road maintenance agreement with the federal government. Next slide, please, Daniel. So the Board of County Commissioners is currently scheduled to consider the interim permits that we just went over at its October 13th, 2020 regular meeting. This public outreach was inspired in part by the fact that those interim permits would be coming forward to the Board of County Commissioners. We wanted to make sure that we proactively informed the public of those permits and their contents, that we're able to answer any questions that the public has concerning them, and take any feedback before that October 13th meeting. In addition, as was discussed with the Pueblos of Nambe and Pojoaque, this seemed as like an opportune time to update the public on where things stood with regard to those particular settlement agreements, since the very important and time-consuming underlying work of the surveys had reached to a point that the finish line is very much coming into sight. So if you go to the final slide, please, Danny. That's the update and the presentation that we had relative to the San Ildefonso Road Settlement Agreement generally, as well as the interim permits. At this time, we'd be pleased to take any questions that anybody has.
There are some questions up on the screen. Maybe we can answer those. But Daniel Frescas, will you be able to get this posted on the county website for people to be able to download a copy of the presentation?
Yes. Yes, sir. I will post this on the Public Works website. And I think we can also send it as an attachment, if that's okay with you, to everybody that sent their emails and registered for this.
Yes,
Thank you.
please
Thank you
do.
very much.
Thank you, Daniel.
Oh. I'm sorry, Greg, what was that?
I said thank you, and then I was going to ask if there were any questions.
There are questions up on the right.
Yeah, there's quite a few questions on the chat. I can go through them. The first one I think we just answered. Orlando Lopez asked if this is going to be there are copies of this anywhere, but we're going to post that on the website. The next one is, will Yellowbird Road require a new address for folks on Sandy Way?
So Yellowbird Road is basically the combination of County Road 84C and County Road 84D. Sandy Way currently is not maintained by the county, but the county will take over maintenance of that road when it becomes Yellowbird Road. I will have to double check with rural addressing, but I'm thinking that because it's no longer going to be named Sandy Way, if Sandy Way is in your address will need to be changed.
Okay, the next question, and these questions were submitted early on in the presentation, so you may have answered them, but I'm just going to go through them anyway. Is the county aware that the Pueblo has closed 84C to the west?
We are aware that they have closed it, and as in accordance with the road settlement agreement and the Yellowbird plans, that portion of County Road 84C is completely on tribal property, and the county will not be maintaining that road any longer. It will only be used for Pueblo use. So right there where they have it closed off, County Road 84C will connect to County Road 84D going in the north and south direction, and that will be a new portion of Yellowbird Road.
All right, the next question is, Acequia de Otra Banda appears to be on the right-of-way of Yellowbird Road. Can we get clarification?
The survey isn't finalized yet. We will double check. I know that both in the plans for Yellowbird Road and Blue Dove, there are contractual line items in the plans to address acequia issues with crossings, but we will double check and we will get that answer back to you, Mr. Lyles.
Okay, the next one. Sorry, go ahead, Commissioner.
I did have a question. When did we receive notification that this road had been closed? I know that we had some issues and some concerns that, you know, if we had some flooding issues or even possibly a head-on collision on this bridge and it was closed because it was a fatality, how will that be addressed in the future? And how did the county address that? Because I was not aware that it was closed. I know that there was some conversations in the past that this could possibly be closed, but I was not made aware that it was closed.
Commissioner Ribal, the new northern southern section of Yellowbird will provide that access out of County Road 84C. So if you currently live on the western portion of County Road 84C, you might go out towards the Pueblo to enter onto that paved road and then out to New Mexico 502. The new access would be to go south onto 84D and then travel 84D east until you get to the bridge on Evergreen Lane. So it shouldn't be an issue of restricting access. We are providing access through Yellowbird to go from 84C south to 84D in the western limits.
In the western limits, are we talking about the dirt road that gets washed out by flooding and is inaccessible at times, or which road are we talking about here besides the bridges?
No, it would be more to the west than the current dirt road, which is 84D. Daniel, can you go to the first slide of the San Ildefonso presentation where there was a map of Yellowbird?
Yeah, just 1 second.
That's slide 16, Dan.
So the yellow portion of the slide you're looking at is Yellowbird. If you look at the right there where his cursor is, right? If you leave your cursor right there, Daniel, that's about the western limits of currently 84D. Then it turns into the private road Sandy Way. We are going to continue that road west and then connect it to the northern portion of 84C. So it's going to be a big loop where you had to go out west on 84C on that dirt road portion to the paved road within the Pueblo boundaries. That road is going to connect now south to 84D. So Commissioner, 84D currently is a dirt road that gets washed out. That's not going to be a portion of Yellowbird Road. And so to talk a little bit more about Yellowbird Road, the Pueblo and the two design consultants that designed both Yellowbird and Blue Dove, we're kind of skipping to the next question, but it will resolve almost all of the gap issues. If you live on 84, on the dirt portion of 84, if you live on 84D, or if you live on 84C, your gap issue will be resolved by the construction of these new roads. And that was the intent. And so there is going to be a new alignment, and you're finalizing both these set of plans. There will be a new alignment for 84C in some areas. For the most part, it will be on existing 84D and 84C, but there is going to be a new alignment to address all the gap issues. And that's very beneficial to the residents that live in this area, because you will not need an easement or a right-of-way granted from San Ildefonso Pueblo. This road will be, both these roads will be constructed on Pueblo property with, I believe, the BIA granting us the right-of-way. Greg, is that correct?
Thank you, Diego. Actually, the rights of way will be granted to the BIA, and we'll maintain the roads pursuant to the road maintenance.
So as part of the construction and the right-of-way agreements, a majority of the gap issues on those roads will be solved.
And I know a question had been raised, and so as long as we're talking about Yellowbird Road, Diego, a question had been raised about its proximity to the river. Could you just briefly address the design standard that was utilized for the roadway?
So Yellowbird was designed utilizing the 100-year 6-hour storm. And what that means is the duration of the storm is 6 hours, and it happens every 100 years. The amount of precipitation for the 6-year storm is basically 2.5 inches. So that means that road shouldn't get flooded. None of the culverts should get overtopped with 2.5 inches of rain falling down within a 6-hour period. So that is a 100-year storm. There is some portion of the southern portion, which is currently 84D, that is in proximity, very close proximity to the Pojoaque River. We are aware of that, and we're looking in the design to assure that when and during flooding events that the road will be protected. And so we're designing and constructing this road to handle the 100-year storm event.
And I see that Kirk has a bear outside of his house. I hope you're okay, Kirk. And then I think the question was where
Greg, I do have one other follow-up question, and maybe I was in between areas that I had connectivity, and I just want to make sure that we're addressing the situation of and maybe we already talked about this, maybe we didn't, but if there is a event where we have a head-on collision on the bridge on either side of these roads that cross over to the northern part of these the residents on this side. If we had a head-on collision on the bridge in San Ildefonso and we had a hit and they had to close that road because there was a fatality, and this is like a worst case event, or flooding took out one of these bridges, would we be able to use the other bridge to give access to our residents to the other side of the river?
Commissioner, this is Diego again. In conversations with San Ildefonso Pueblo, in emergencies, they would allow access through that portion of County Road 84C. We did talk about that. In emergency situations, they would agree to open that road to the private residents in El Rancho.
And do we help maintain that road? Because I know that road does get pretty difficult at times, and it's in pretty poor condition at this point. And I know that it would still be passable possibly, but can we help maintain that to make sure that it is at least passable and at least accessible by residents and not by four-wheel vehicle? Because I know that this road does get its current condition right now is not the best at this point. So I do want to work with residents and with the San Ildefonso Pueblo to make sure we help maintain this road, just so that in that event that we can use this road and it's not detrimental to anybody or giving problems as far as sliding into drainage areas or anything else, because I know this road is in pretty poor condition at this point.
So Commissioner, this is Diego again. We did maintain County Road 84C for many years. I might have to ask Greg to clarify what the tribal agreement says, but I think we're gonna stop maintaining it as part of the construction of Yellowbird Road. I think you make valid concerns, and maybe we will have to have some sort of memorandum of understanding with Sanai about the maintenance of that road during emergencies or the opening of it in emergencies. But you do bring a valid question, so we'll get back to you after we coordinate with San Ildefonso specifically on that question.
Thank you.
So the next question is, can you clarify what you mean by the northern segment of 101D? Daniel, can you go back to that map that you were showing on slide 16?
And in words, it's the segment of the road between County Road 84 and 84D. So go ahead.
So the main road, when you're coming off of the state highway that goes to Los Alamos, that is New Mexico 502. If you go and you go into the main road into El Rancho, that is 101D, that's Evergreen Lane. When you get to 84, you take a right by what used to be the old bar, and then you take a left back onto 101D. So the road that includes the bridge, that if you're looking at your map and you see Yellowbird Loop, the words Yellowbird Loop, that is 101D. 101D is Evergreen. It basically connects 84C to the state road, but it is not a straight road. It makes a jog there by the church. So when I referred to the northern segment, if you're talking about my comment earlier, it was the portion of 101D between 84D and 84C that runs adjacent to that trailer park right there.
Can I speak on that?
Yes, and if you could identify your name.
Absolutely.
That would be helpful
Heather,
for
go ahead.
people that are taking minutes.
This is Heather Nordquist, and between 84C and 84D, 101D was my family property. It does not belong to San Ildefonso in any way, shape, or fashion. That doesn't make any sense. Perhaps you're talking about from the bridge south toward the bar, but in no way should the northern section of 101D be included in any Pueblo settlement.
So I want to make sure we're not talking past each other. The settlement agreement defines the northern segment and how it was used in this presentation as the segment between 84 and 84D. Are we talking about the same area?
No, he said 84D and 84C.
So
I think you're referring to 80.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
So
I hope we clarified that, Ms.
You're talking about over the river and the bridge.
Correct.
Okay.
That will still be named County Road 101D Evergreen Lane. And I made a comment earlier about the intersection of 84C and 101D. That's what I thought you were talking about the
No.
segment. So
No.
we
Okay,
do concur, and I believe that section that you're talking about is not in the tribal agreement.
Right. It's just that is the northernmost part. So that's what I was clarifying.
What about people who have existing access permits to 84C? They enjoy the interim permit to then use 84C. Sir, I think it's Beers. Could you restate that in different words? I'm not sure that I understand the question.
Mr. Beers?
I'm sorry, Greg, what was that?
Okay, Mr. Beers, we may have to follow up with you. I assume you don't have audio. I'm not quite sure that I understand your question, so we'll follow up with you specifically to make sure that we get it answered.
Okay, should we continue on with the questions in the chat?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Diego, I'm not sure which one was the one you read last.
It was about 84C from Kirk Beers. I think the next question is, will title companies accept the global permit, or must people get an individual permit?
I don't want to speak on behalf of all title companies, but based upon my conversation with John Fox, I believe that the global permit would generally suffice with the settlement agreement. But again, that's my general understanding. And as Mr. Trujillo's comments demonstrated, each individual parcel may be ultimately unique. The $100 processing fee for individual property-specific permits would be paid to San Ildefonso. With regard to, so the question is, will Pueblo have traffic enforcement, and if so, will traffic tickets have to go to tribal court? My understanding is that the jurisdiction, criminal jurisdiction, will not change as a result of the road right-of-ways being contemplated. And generally speaking, and I believe that Carolyn Abeda from San Ildefonso Pueblo is on the phone, and so she can correct me if I'm wrong. Tribal criminal jurisdiction does not extend to victimless crimes committed by non-Pueblo
right, the next one is, how long does the permit last?
So the permits are intended to be interim as a bridge between now and the final, the more permanent 200-year solution with regard to the roads. So they'll last on their face until April 12th, 2023, or until rights of way are granted or the new roadways are operational.
Okay, this one's from Kirk, concerned about the course of the western portion of Yellowbird Road. Many questions that can't be answered on this forum. Is the county planning and willing to listen to the alternatives that satisfy the intent of Yellowbird Road?
So, Mr. Lies, like I said earlier, this road is designed for the 100-year 6-hour storm event. So all the drainage structures have been sized for that event. If there were, for instance, a 1,000-year flood, the water would run over the road in several areas, but the engineer has sized all of the drainage structures to accommodate the 100-year 6-hour storm. And I believe the next question is, the 300-year-old cottonwood bosque would need to be destroyed. There is a area near the southern portion that is kind of by Sandy Way, the private portion of Sandy Way, where there is a few trees that would need to be removed for the alignment of Yellowbird. Our plan is not to go and cut down everything in that area. We are trying to leave as many trees as possible, but there is 1 or 2 trees that will need to be cut down as the new alignment for the Yellowbird portion of Sandy Way.
All right, the next one is, will the Pueblos have traffic enforcement? And if so, will traffic tickets have to go to tribal court?
I believe we addressed that earlier. There was a question above that concerning the western portion of Yellowbird Road. The county contractually agreed in the settlement agreement to construct Yellowbird Road and Blue Dove Road. So I think that's a contractual obligation that exists. I'm not sure what the alternatives are that might be proposed relative to the construction. If that's a wholesale alternative, again, we have a contractual commitment to construct the road. If there are more granular level issues, and we'd be pleased to hear them. But again, I think it depends upon what exactly we're talking about.
Okay, this next question is, have the Pueblos performed an environmental impact statement to be released to the public and homeowners? What all the changes as planned road resurfacing, grading, moving dirt, and how will that affect the acequias, animals, livestock, farming, etc.?
So as part of the Amit water line, the Bureau of Reclamation has done an environmental assessment for the installation of the water line. Santa Fe County is obligated through the road settlement agreements to do the environmental assessment for the construction of Yellowbird Loop and Blue Dove. We are in the process of procuring those services now. So Santa Fe County will be responsible for conducting the environmental assessment for Blue Dove and Yellowbird.
This next one is, not sure how we can cross the river to get to 84D if the only bridge is on 101D gets blocked. Please explain.
Mr. Fresquez, I have a question, a follow-up question to Diego. Will this study impact the cost of the construction of these roads?
There will be a cost associated with the environmental assessment. I believe that the county can build these roads with the amount of funding that we have available. We were lucky enough to get donated the recycled asphalt pavement that is stockpiled there at the cemetery. We got that from the New Mexico Department of Transportation. That is about $1 million worth of material right there. And I have agreed to volunteer our road maintenance staff and equipment to place the millings and to place the chip seal. That is how we're going to be able to, instead of having a dirt road, be able to have a paved surface. And so there is going to be a cost associated with the environmental assessment, but I do believe that we can build these roads as proposed with the money that is available in the budget.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Diego. And I just kind of am wondering on the west side of the loop that we have going here, how many residents will benefit from that loop from, I guess it would be the northwest corner to the southwest corner.
Commissioner, I don't know how many residents, the number, but there is going to be a significant benefit to the residents by not having to purchase a gap easement from San Ildefonso Pueblo. So the intent, part of the intent was to avoid the gap issues. And I think we've been very successful in doing that. A majority of the gap issues will be solved by the construction of Blue Dove and Yellowbird. So I think Yellowbird has, both the construction of Yellowbird and Blue Dove have a lot of very good points. One of them is we're going to turn the dirt roads into a paved road. I mean, to me, that's an awesome improvement. The other benefit is we're going to solve the gap issues. I think that's a big benefit to the private residents. One of the other big benefits is that we're going to have an access from 84C to 84D on the western side of Yellowbird that was never provided before. And so those are three very big benefits that I think the construction of these roads solve or contribute to.
I would agree with those statements, except for the loop that's on the west side. I'm kind of wondering if the county can save money by not completing the loop on the west side. So I'm still wondering. I still want more information on that.
And Commissioner, we will get you more information. This meeting was to, not really go over Yellowbird and Blue Dove in detail. We're going to have several meetings after this that are going to go into detail about the plans, about the accesses, and about the proposed alignment. So you will get your answers before that, and any other individuals that have any questions, if they can email Gary, I'd be glad to sit down with them and show them the plans and show them what is proposed, where their access is planned as part of this construction project. There are some accesses that are going to be modified. There's not a large amount. For the most part, your current access, if you have an access to County Road 84C or 84D, for the most part, your access is going to remain the same. But we are going to reach out to the individuals where their access is going to be modified, or there's issues with their private property in relation to Yellowbird Road. So there's going to be numerous meetings and a lot of public outreach and private time with residents if they have any concerns.
Okay, thank you. That's one of my areas that I want to make sure that we get answered, and there's going to be several others, of course. But thank you, Diego.
Right. Attorney Schaefer and Gary, I just wanted to see if we wanted to continue with the chat questions. It's getting a little extensive here. I don't know if we want to ask the people that have the ability to speak through their microphones to ask some questions, or if we want to continue with the chat. It looks like it's just on this side.
Is there any other specific questions that anybody wants to raise?
And then to be clear that we will respond to everyone that has posed a question in chat with as much information as we can share with you. And we will go through that list and get a response out.
So I have a question, if you don't mind. This is Carl Trujillo. Will there be property owners, like for instance, I'm looking at Yellow Bird here as the road goes around these private claim lands here in the center, and these private claims were chopped up many different times to build a new lot. Is there potential for property owners to be in the center of this area where they'll have to obtain surveys or new surveys from their neighbors to gain access to their home if there's only one point of access into that particular private claim, original private claim?
Mr. Trujillo, based on the survey and the design, no private property will be separated. The construction and the design of Yellowbird Loop is completely on BIA-owned property. The construction of both Blue Dove and Yellowbird is not going to go through any private property. It's completely constructed on BIA. And with that, that's how we solve the gap problems.
And I think, Mr. Trio, if you're asking a different question, which is, are there going to be parcels within the Yellowbird Road that will not have access? I believe that the answer, to the best of my knowledge, is no. That the parcels within it will either be able to take access from existing private easements that are already documented, or from portions of 84C that are on private land that will continue to exist, or from other county maintained roads which will continue to be denominated as such. I hope that answers your question.
Mr. Trujillo,
questions?
Mr. Trujillo, I think you're muted if you're trying to talk.
So if I heard you correctly, Mr. Schaefer, is that there, in your interpretation, there should be no private landowner within the middle of Yellowbird or the other roads that would require a new survey from their neighbor to obtain a new right-of-way within those private claims, that all of those properties will have access with existing private right-of-way surveys that exist currently.
The best of my knowledge, as I sit here today, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
So without, may I ask a question? Sorry.
Yes, and if you would identify yourself.
Heather Nordquist. So I'm very concerned with the alignment of this road and with safety issues for flooding. No offense to the engineers. There are particular parcels on 84D, for instance, that I know proceed quite a bit. I know of one that goes all the way across 84D, very close to the intersection there. And so what you're saying sounds good when you're saying it, but I think you're proposing putting a road in the river in certain places if it's just going to follow the private parcels. So I am very concerned, and we have flooding problems. I'm on 84B now, but I grew up on 101D, 84D, 84C. That parcel is my family's. So with due respect, if you guys would allow me to share for just a couple seconds, I can show you something from my screen if someone would allow. This was 2017. We had a rainstorm that dumped about 5 inches of rain. And to give anybody perspective that doesn't know El Rancho, where they're talking about Blue Dove Road, Blue Dove Road, the current version, sits higher in elevation from us and quite close. Okay, so we're sort of the lowlands. And this is what happened. I'm not actually the lowest spot. Let me see if I can find the lowest spot for you. This was Dave Neal's house next door to me. And this is 84B after a heavy rain. So excuse me if I don't trust that the engineering is gonna deal with rain.
Ms. Nordquist, we can't see your screen.
Okay, I asked to share it. Here we go. Let me do it. Oh, sorry. Let me show you the. This was Mr. Neal's property in 2017, and this is 84B. This was the lowest of the properties, who's our neighbor to the, I have to think about this, west. There was probably over a foot of water in their yard throughout. And as I said, this is just south of what is now Blue Dove Road. So we just had a lake. It was a complete and total lake on these properties.
Ms. Nordquist, my family has lived in the El Rancho area for hundreds of years, so I'm very familiar with a lot of the drainage problems that are there.
Mine too.
And I'm not discrediting your pictures. I know there's a lot of drainage problems on these roads. We're going to try to address them to the best of our ability. Standard engineering practice is to address the 100-year storm. So a 100-year storm for that area, if the duration of the rain is 24 hours, is 2.93 inches. So basically 3 inches of rain. So our road will be designed for 3 inches of rain, basically for a 24-hour period. They designed it specifically for the 6-hour storm, which is 2.5 inches in 6 hours. But if we get 5, and I'm very familiar with what happened in 2017, there was portions of County Road 84 that were washed out more towards Pojoaque. 5 inches of rain is basically a 1,000-year storm. And so most engineers don't design beyond a 100-year storm just due to the practicality and the cost of those size of structures. So we
And
are.
I understand what you're saying, but I'm saying you're telling me about the engineering based on an alignment that we don't know. And if you know the properties in El Rancho, I know that some of them come clear across, private claims come clear across 84D, for instance. And so I think what you're telling me is you're going to move that road into the river in order to accommodate that it goes on Sinai property. And
Miss Nordquist, I understand your concerns, and maybe we can address it in more detail in a separate meeting. But for the most part, 84D is going to remain in its, 84D, the portion of 84D that runs parallel to the Pojoaque River. For the most part, it's going to remain in its alignment. The surveyor that has been conducting the right-of-way and the engineering firm that has been doing the design on Yellowbird don't show any parcels on 84D that go all the way, private parcels that run through 84D currently that I'm aware of. But I'm glad to speak with anybody that has some concerns in detail. The map that we have right now available to us on this webcast is not a detailed map. And I have way more detailed maps that I can show you. So I'd be glad to set up a meeting with anybody that's concerned about their property and how the alignment of the road is going to affect their property. And we can sit down and look at big maps together. And I'm more than willing to dedicate that time to anybody that wants to have some answers.
okay, then I'm really wondering about Medrano and this survey, because we've looked at the parcels and I know of at least one. I know my family's property goes into 84D and 101D currently, and that there's a parcel about 3 or 4 properties over. If you know Annette and Michael Perez, theirs goes either all the way or most of the way over 84D. according to county survey records, according to their property boundaries. And maybe Dave Neal can help that out.
You guys follow the existing alignments of the roads and they traverse private property, and that can be proven. It's still not clear to me how the county can give this property to the BIA. And that's eventually what's going to happen. We have documented evidence that the surveys that Medrano did show that private property goes across county roads, and that is not something the county can give away. And I don't understand why there's any argument about this.
So, Mr. Neal and Ms.
If I could. So, what the county is doing is assigning or transferring a prescriptive right-of-way to the Bureau of Indian Affairs for terms that are equal to the other rights-of-way being granted. County's position is that...
Hold on just a minute, Attorney Schaefer. On the WebEx meeting, it's showing Gary Hirona speaking, and I would like to make sure that our county staffs announce their title and who's speaking. Thank you.
Oh, sure. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. Greg Schaefer, Santa Fe County Attorney speaking. So the county's position is that it has prescriptive rights with regard to county roads throughout the county, not just in this area, where they cross private land, and that it has the authority under state law to transfer that to the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So that is the county's position. That's reflected in the settlement agreement itself and is consistent with previous statements that the county has made with regard to that subject. At the end of the term of the right-of-way, the status of those grants that will return to where things are today. So I hope I answered that question. I can understand you might disagree with that perspective and that position, but that is the stated and official position.
So let me get this clear, because you and I have had this conversation. You're saying that it's your intent for the county to transfer our private property over to BIA for the purpose of Santa to then sell that easement for utilities, and then we all get charged for it. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying that the county will be transferring its real property interests, which are prescriptive easements.
No, I think you're transferring, if I may, Greg, if I may here, I think what you're saying is you're transferring the right of use to use that piece of land for transportation. You're not transferring it for use of that land for utilities. And that was my next question, but I'll wait till, and if Heather's got a follow on, because I've got another whole question about the regional water system. You all well know that the regional water system is going to be substantially completed when they run out of money. And that's what's written in the current funding document. So why do you think that Yellowbird Loop is going to have a regional water system, which is distribution, not transmission? Most of the stuff that's funded right now is transmission. The distribution lines are Yellowbird Loop. And I'm having a hard time saying you're going to do all of this because you're expecting the regional water system to be constructed up there, when in fact the current funding levels are showing they're just going to get transmission done. I don't understand why you're going down this path, but I got about 5 other points, but I'll stop at this point.
Mr. Neal, this is Diego Gomez with Santa Fe County again. In Miss Northwest, I want to clarify something. I misspoke earlier. There are some properties on the east side of 101D. Yes, on the east side of 101D, along County Road 84D, where that road does go over private property. In those instances, the county will abandon the portion of the road that goes over private property, and that will not relinquish the private property's ownership of that. So you will retain ownership of that. At no point will private property be granted to the BIA. So I misspoke earlier saying there was no properties that go over County Road 84D. That is not correct. There are properties that go over County Road 84D on the east side of 101D. So I just want to make that clear.
So if I might, I'm an attorney. My name is Blair Dunn. I represent several of the folks on this call. I have a question regarding Judge Schaefer's discussion about a prescriptive easement. Judge, is there some sort of notice that was given to these folks when the county either took those prescriptive easements by eminent domain or by inverse condemnation? When did the county actually perfect such a legal take of their property?
Please, Mr. Dunn, call me Greg. Didn't like being called a judge when I was a judge, and now I'm just Greg Schaefer, so thank you. The county has established in other litigation its prescriptive rights throughout the county. If you're asking if there was notice given to specific property owners over the years relative to that, I couldn't answer that question as I sit here today.
Judge, I appreciate that, and I apologize. It's hard for me not to call you Judge, but I'm sure you're aware of the elements of a prescriptive easement, which is that it has to be open and notorious. And that would mean that there had to have been some sort of notice of some sort, at least given that the county was notorious and open about their taking of that prescriptive easement. That's just an element of the law. So I do think on behalf of my clients, I hope that the county could figure that out. Thank you for answering my question.
Sure, and I think that by virtue of the road existing, our view would be that's the open and notorious component of it. So we believe that the rights exist, but the settlement agreement goes on to provide that subject to the special funding source that has been set aside for this purpose, that if those rights are challenged, that the county will take the necessary steps to condemn the right-of-way in order to implement the settlement agreement. So again, that's set forth in the settlement agreement and agreed to as between the county and San Ildefonso and the federal government. Are there any other questions before we break for the evening?
Mr. Neal, you're on mute.
I have a question on tribal enforcement. These are going to be county maintained roads, and does the Sanai Pueblo have an enforcement agency? So is it going to be the federal BIA that's going to enforce any kind of traffic violations on these roads? And if so, how did that get commissioned? Bye-bye.
I think we started to answer this before, Mr. Neal, and
okay. All right.
I don't believe that the settlement agreements will have any impact on criminal jurisdiction within Pueblo land.
But wait a minute. You now have a county road that's going to be a federal road. That's what's going to happen, I'm guessing, so many years from now. And of course, then you have the problem about, I'm not clear about the Blair Dunn answer, because ultimately you're going to have to get a right-of-way from the BIA on these roads, and they're probably going to ask the same question. How did the landowner get notified that they were losing a right to this land? I'll stop. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. And again, I apologize. I didn't identify myself as Greg Schaefer, Santa Fe County Attorney, when Are there any other questions? And I don't know, Commissioner Roybal, if you're still on the phone, if you would like to give any concluding remarks. if not, or if so, I would just personally thank everybody for their participation this evening, and for the very thoughtful questions that were brought forward. Gary Harone said at the beginning, this is a beginning, not an end of public outreach. There will be much more to come as we get closer in time to the rights of way applications being finalized and moving forward with implementation of the settlement agreement. But always very much appreciated the interest from this area of the county in these very important issues and the thoughtfulness that you bring to these meetings. So personally, thank you. And Mr. Chair, if you're still on the phone, I think it'd be more than appropriate for you to wrap up our meeting tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Schaefer. I really do appreciate your closing statements. And what I will say is that I think our constituents bring up a lot of valid concerns. And I want to make sure that each and every one of them are addressed. And I want to make sure that we're working with our constituents and working with our settling partners and making sure that we do address all of these concerns and we have some clarification as to the motion, the path forward, because I think that a lot of concerns were brought up tonight, and I want to make sure that we do address each and every concern tonight. And I want to thank everybody for being here tonight and participating and just thanking you for bringing these concerns forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. We appreciate your leadership in this matter. And I would just reiterate to everyone that we have your comments. We are going to do our best to respond to each one of those. You have my email address and my phone number in the PowerPoint that will be made available to you. I urge you to send any of your questions to me, and then we will work to get you answers on all of those. And I also wanted to reiterate that we appreciate your cooperation and that this really is just a beginning point, and we will continue to have ongoing dialogue with you to let you ask your questions and do our best to get you answers. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Huron. And I also want to go ahead and put my contact information, and this is my personal cell phone and what I share with all my constituents. And I want to give you time to get a paper and pencil. This is my personal contact, my personal cell phone number, and my number is 505-310-7587. Once again, this is 505-310-7587. This is my personal cell number, and I want to reach out to every individual that is here tonight with concerns and let you know that I am willing to answer your phone calls, and I will work to answer any questions that you do have in the best way that I can. And once again, this is Commissioner Roybal. Thank you.
Hey, Commissioner, this is Dave Neal. You there?
Yes, Dave Neal, go ahead, sir.
I wanted to thank you and the guys on the county for putting up that message board by the transformer station there and coming into El Rancho. Thank you very much for doing that. I really appreciate that, me personally. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you all. And good evening.
Have a great evening. Good night.
I thought